Good evening. My name is Greg Orwig, and I serve as Chief of Staff in the President's Office at Whitworth University. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here tonight to this, which is our first in a week-long series of activities to mark the inauguration of Beck Taylor as Whitworth's 18th president. And actually, Beck and his wife Julie are here in the audience this evening, so would you please join me in welcoming them and thanking them for agreeing to come to Whitworth. We're thrilled. I also want to start at the beginning by asking anyone who has a cell phone to please turn that off or silence it for the program this evening. Thank you. You know, in our very first discussion with Beck about the inauguration, he made it clear that he wanted it to be a time to lift up and celebrate Whitworth's mission and not his installation as president. Whitworth's mission is to pursue rigorous and open intellectual inquiry and the integration of Christian faith and learning as complementary rather than competing values. And it's that mission that inspired our inauguration theme, celebrating a community of courage. It takes courage to lift up curiosity and conviction, grace and truth, responsibility and compassion in a world that too often pits those values against one another. And it takes a community, I think, to nurture that kind of courage over the long term. We at Whitworth count it a privilege to be part of the Spokane community. And that's why we made it a point to make our first event of Inauguration Week an event that we held downtown where we thought about what we at Whitworth and what we as the citizens of Spokane could do to make this a community of courage. The great poet Maya Angelou has said, "Courage is the most important of all the virtues, because without courage you can't practice any other virtue consistently. You can practice any virtue erratically, but nothing consistently without courage." We are fortunate tonight to have a group of courageous community leaders to serve on our panel and to have this discussion about what makes Spokane a community of courage. I'll introduce them to you, starting on my right, immediate right, Breean Beggs, who's a 1985 Whitworth alum and a local attorney who, in his former role as chief catalyst of the Spokane Center for Justice, gave a powerful voice to the voiceless in our community. And to his right, Betsy Cowles, who is chair of the Cowles Company and a dedicated community servant who has helped transform downtown Spokane in important ways. Then Ann Kirkpatrick, who is chief of police, of course, and whose community engagement and common sense leadership. Raise your hand if you've heard Chief Kirkpatrick's 5 rules. Anyone? Okay. They're worth hearing. Has helped energize her role as Spokane's police chief. And Lonnie Mitchell, who this year is in his 25th year as senior pastor of Bethel AME Church, which ministers in amazing ways to the Spokane community. And then Julia Stronks, professor of political science at Whitworth, whose leadership has helped all of our students explore what it means to live lives of commitment, how to connect their deepest worldview convictions to important life decisions that they make. To moderate our discussion, we are fortunate to have Ted McGregor, publisher of The Inlander. And Ted's mission for The Inlander is much the same as our mission here tonight, which is to make Spokane a great community for all of its citizens. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Ted for really catching the vision for this evening from the first time I talked to him about it, and for helping shape the dialogue we're going to have, and also for his generous advertising support for the program. So Ted, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Nicely done, Greg. He was back there rehearsing while we were wondering what we're supposed to do. I'd like to start by saying, look around you at this theater. The Bing Crosby Theater is a gem in Spokane, and I think we should all find ways to support it. It really needs to have events like this. I wish I could say that Bing Crosby dropped out of Whitworth to go to California and become rich and famous, but close. So courage and education is a little bit of an odd combination, but I mean, when you think about it, you know, from the times where Galileo was questioning, you know, church doctrine, asking questions can be dangerous. And I think, you know, today I'm going to start asking questions. I hope it's not dangerous. We have a police chief on the panel, but I'll try and get through it pretty well. I'm also asking everybody in the audience to come up with a question, write it on one of those pieces of paper, and bring it up to the front, and we'll have a chance to bring some of those into the conversation as we go forward. So I'm going to start out here with Breean, and we are going to ask each panelist to respond to this question. How does Spokane rate as a community of courage? How can the organization you represent contribute to making it better?
Well, the good news is I spent most of the 1980s here in Spokane, and Spokane now is far more courageous than the 1980s. It just seems energized and active. And I've seen in the 6 years since I've been back, lots of people coming here with talents and skills and jumping right in. And I think if I was going to think about what it takes to be courageous in a community, from my perspective, it's two pieces. One is to speak the truth as we understand it, even if it's unpopular or might make people feel uncomfortable. And I think Spokane's doing that pretty well right now. But the second part, sometimes people forget, and that is to reach out and care and love people and give them space to have their truth too. And I think that really is the lesson that Spokane is going to be dealing with, because there's so many different people who are energized and have their views. But how to live together and give people space to find their truth and come together as a community. And as often as you might see me advocating against the powers that be on behalf of a person, what you don't see is me behind the scenes talking to people about how to be an advocate and how to care and be engaged and not polarize any more than they might already do on their own.
Betsy, how does Spokane rate as a community of courage to you?
Well, I was thinking about this as I was driving in, that, you know, I'm a glass half full person, but I think business people are generally that way. I mean, you have to be, because, you know, you have to believe there's opportunity and there's life after the recession and life after whatever crisis is at your front door. So I think Spokane is a very courageous community. I think there's a history of it. You know, you go back to, well before my lifetime, but in my lifetime you have the World's Fair. You have getting rid of the Aryan nations, which was a pretty ugly period of time, but the community was engaged in how to deal with that situation. That was kind of a regional issue. And then, you know, today, if you look down towards the River Point campus and the concept of the U District and a medical school, and that's huge courage to have a vision of those kind of big, life-changing, community-changing projects. But I think it's also the little things, and that, you know, there are the small things that happen day to day that show courage, and each one of us plays a role in that. And so it isn't just these huge systemic changes that the community needs to engage in. It's that day-to-day stuff, and, you know, it's that not just civic discourse, it's civil discourse, and that a way of communicating and dealing with tough issues that I think sometimes in our history we haven't been very good at. I think right now, Bryn's right, you know, we're doing okay in that category, but that's something you have to work on every day. From our perspective, from our company, and, you know, what do we do? Well, the media part of our business, you know, its fundamental role is to provide information for the community so that it can have an educated discourse or a place to have a dialogue. The other thing I think that we do, since we're fourth generation family business here, is that at our philanthropic level or at our holding company level, we think in terms of generational change, you know, and what happened, we think in terms of, you know, 20 and 50 years, not 5 or 10, and we're family owned, so we don't have to worry about stock prices or things like that. So we look at projects and how they can have a long-term impact, and again, it's sort of investing in systemic change. Things like Priority Spokane, and, you know, how do you fix the dropout rate? And, you know, what can we do today that's going to have an impact 10 years from now?
Well, that gives us a good entree into Chief Kirkpatrick, where your family's been here for a long time. Chief, I think you've been here 5 years now?
Just over 4 years.
4 years,
So I was
okay.
going to say that I'm the newcomer to Spokane. But for 20 years that I've lived in the Northwest, I have been with the police departments on the west side, and we would typically have conventions in Spokane. So as an outside observer, I have watched Spokane develop and grow. So to answer the question, is Spokane a community of courage? My definition of courage is pretty simple. Courage means to take heart. It's the opposite of discouraged. A person who is discouraged is a person who has lost heart. So a person of courage or a community of courage is one where you have taken heart. Also, courage, because I'm asked this question all the time as a police officer, what is courage? Courage is doing the right thing when you are absolutely scared to death. So it's an act of the will and not the emotion. So I have watched Spokane invest in their community from a business side of it. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, of business developers. I understand what it is for a businessman or woman to take the risk of financially investing in a community and losing their shirt. I've seen that in my home. So I have an understanding and appreciation for the community investing in seeing Spokane grow. I do think that we still have a long way to go with courage and the cultural shifts that we need to have in the criminal justice system. But that's not only true to Spokane, that's true to the criminal justice system. So to make cultural shifts and change does require a great deal of courage.
Reverend Mitchell, you have a lot of experience, dealing with the least among us. Not to pigeonhole all the dealings that you have, but I'm very interested in hearing how you see Spokane as a community courage when it comes to social services and those sorts of things.
Well, first of all, let me correct the introduction because it was said that I've been the pastor at Bethel AME Church for 25 years, but actually it was only 19 years. We are really celebrating my 25th year in ministry, which included some time over in Seattle. But anyway, I have been absolutely honored to be here in Spokane. And Spokane has done a lot for me and my family. I have grown up in Spokane sort of, in the 90s and now in 2000. And when I think of Spokane as a place of courage, it's a wonderful city. We had a situation back, and I think it was back in 1995, and I think the chamber was having its annual meeting, and they invited Andrew Young to come. And Andrew Young came, and they were talking about how Spokane is going into the future, and so they had I think it was an elementary school, and they paraded the kids across the stage, but there was no person of color, and I think the courage there was for Spokane to come together and say, you know what? We missed that, and it was a time then where people came together and said, you know what, we have to be more sensitive to that situation, and the leadership of Spokane really had the courage to say, you know what, let's embrace everybody, and from that time on. The leaders of Spokane used courage to go forward. And I believe that we are a better community because of that leadership.
Julia?
I agree with the other panels about Spokane, but I would add this. To me, courage is about using your own talent to stand in the breach for someone else, to stand up for others. Now, there's a lot of debate about what the purpose of a university is. And as a Christian, I'm influenced by and inspired by the work of someone named Nicholas Walterstorff. He is the Noah Porter Chair in Philosophy at Yale University. And he's argued that for a Christian university, the emphasis should not be academic excellence necessarily, or raising the endowment, or getting students into elite graduate schools. The most important thing for a Christian university is to make sure that every single student and every single major thinks about the field that they're studying as an avenue for helping to bring about God's shalom in a broken but redeemed world. So every business major, every artist, every athlete, every pre-law student, every theology major, every English major, all of us are thinking about how can we use our intellect to bring healing in a broken world. And I would say from the university perspective, to the extent that we do that, we're helping to raise the level of courage in Spokane.
Well said. Now we're going to the bonus round. So, Breean, this is on social justice. You've stood up for what you believe in, and around here I know what that means. As a journalist, we're always like, who can we call to comment on this story? And I hate to say it, but you've become one of those guys. Let's call Breean and see what he thinks. That takes courage to do that, and I think other places I've been, there have been more people like you. There's 5 or 6 that you can call when you're in a pinch. But it also means that you're sort of taking on powerful interests at times. Where does that courage come from inside of you? And you addressed this earlier, but do you think enough people speak their conscience?
They gave us the questions ahead of time, so I had a chance to think about that a little bit. And I came up with 2 things, and I didn't come to them right away, but as I thought about it, and the first was this, is that in all the brokenness in the world and the injustice and just tragedies around us, whether they're natural disasters or poverty or people dying, I think the thing that gets me through the darkest nights and gets me to stand up, and whether it's go to the Supreme Court or write a letter or just be threatened, sometimes physically, is this. Our society, our system of government has this idea of equality and justice and a social contract and agreement. And it often doesn't work out. I mean, all you have to do is look in the Constitution and see slavery right in the Constitution and go, wow. But look at the arc of history in our time. And it seems to get better, that there seems to be some core truths that are there that people come to realize, and they spread to the community. And I think knowing that and seeing that not in the short term, and over the 20 years I've been a lawyer, I have watched change, social change. And so that inspires me. And then the second thing that inspires me, if that wasn't enough, is that when people walk into my office and they're just good, salt-of-the-earth people, and they're being abused by somebody, some system, and it's usually ignorance or fear on the other side, but they have no way to do anything about it. And I was given the gift of a brain that could get into law school and that could be a lawyer, and I have that license. And so I can do something about it. And there is nothing more powerful than standing up for someone and bringing that truth to light to the community and empowering just that one individual. It may not change the whole world, but if it changes their world, that'll keep me going.
Betsy, this has to do with risk-taking in business. And a lot of you maybe predate this moment in recent history, but if you've gone to a movie downtown and eaten at P.F. Chang's, I think you can thank Betsy Cowles here for a lot of that. I was there watching a lot of this happen, and it was a pretty contentious time. I mean, you took some risks with your property, with your family's money, and that had to take some courage. I think you had a vision there, and it's paid off, but you really had to get through some moments there. I think we all can remember that. But I think risk-taking is really the fodder for our progress in business and in everything. And do you think we encourage enough risk-taking in business in Spokane?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot more momentum today than there might have been at other periods. But again, I think communities have sort of cycles of economic momentum and lack of it. And I do think where we run into trouble is sort of where we can talk a good game about what we want, but there are issues about when the marketplace is ready from a private sector side, and then what the public sector wants to have happen or wants to do or not do. And some of the incentives or disincentives are disconnected. And but that's constant work about whether it's comp plans or design review for downtown buildings. I mean, the way the design review process goes, Nordstrom couldn't be built. In fact, Apple shouldn't have been built. But, you'd need I think the Apple store should be a success. So Christmas, that's Santa Claus can buy iPads and iPhones. But that's where the conversations have to happen, kind of one-on-one between business and the public sector. Where it really does work is if each side, they're not sides, each entity knows where its strengths are. So the public sector is really good at infrastructure. I mean, look at the U District as a great example. Infrastructure of streets, roads, and other development incentives. Developers, you get the higher education, they're really good at putting together the research and the academic programs and bringing that to a physical location. And then private development will happen in and around that in the next 10 to 20 years, and that's going to be just a monumental change for Spokane. So it's and inherent in all that, and every step of the way, it doesn't matter if you're on the public side or the private side, there's risk taking. And again, I kind of go back to civil discussion where you can have a dialogue over differences in a civil way rather than in a name-calling way. And that's where, if our community requires that of all of us, and sort of this expectation that those dialogues will happen in a positive way. We've kind of done that with the Higher Education Leadership Group, which is an organization that came out of the chamber that has all of the university presidents that meet on a quarterly basis. And they meet for an hour by themselves and kind of work out whatever they need to work out, and then there's a group of business people that have lunch with them. This is a really great way to get those guys to, be talking with each other about important issues, and they're certainly contentious issues, but they work it out behind closed doors, and we have great momentum going forward.
Chief, this is about transparency. I'm sure you've never heard this question before, but I don't think anyone could have known that when you took the job that would be such a difficult time, and it's been probably one of the tougher times. And I'm just curious, you've been an advocate of transparency, but you've also been a target on questions about transparency having to do with city policy and police, collective bargaining. How do you balance your principles with practical considerations?
Well, that's one of those areas where there is a definite clash. It's one thing to be able to say that you philosophically believe in transparency, but I also have laws. I have employment law, I have union laws, I have a whole body of law that I must balance between a philosophy and a legal parameter or boundary. And so when I took my oath of office, what I did say on the day that I gave a short little speech, I said that my guiding principle would be to do what the law says for me to do. That keeps me in check. So it's my check and balance. So if the law is clear about an issue such as a transparency question, I will follow the law. The law is a representative of the community's will. Therefore, you do not want me playing, I like this law, I don't like this law, I'll choose this one, I don't choose this one. But it's under the umbrella of the overarching philosophy that when I can be transparent, I want to be, but my boundary, again, will be governed by a legal standard.
Reverend Mitchell, you've been a pastor for 19 or 25 years. So we'll figure that out later. But in that time, you know, religion at time to time, especially in events that the media plays up, and one that's coming to Spokane apparently fairly soon, has often become quite divisive, with some religious leaders sowing seeds of discord. Do you see ways that religion still, through personal courage, bring about unity and peace?
Well, let me first of all applaud a lot of my colleagues who have done just marvelous things in this community. You know, whether it be Reverend Andrews or Reverend Happy Watkins dealing with the education issue. We've had people in the faith community that would really stand up and do some amazing things. And I think that, you know, we have come to a point where we could just really be out there in the community and helping the community. And I know that you know, we have different opinions in certain things because we probably have different denominations and everything, but we can still come together under the umbrella of our main thrust, which is, you know, we're all Christians. And so we come together, and I believe that this is a major movement in the Spokane area where the faith community can come together and partner with business, partner with the community, and make things happen. And once again, you know, I'm very honored to be in Spokane because we have that dynamic leadership in Spokane that would make that happen. And so, you know, from a courage standpoint, once again, I applaud a lot of my colleagues who are doing a wonderful job in this area. And I believe that we will continue to move forward and help this community grow and be that community of courage.
Julia, as a teacher at Whitworth, you've brought your kids out to see the real world, take them out of the classroom. I think that's great. It sounds like there have been times where you've brought your students face to face with some of the things that maybe they haven't experienced in their early years, you know, poverty, homelessness, some of the tougher things that go on in our community. In your research and working with kids and just looking into this, do you think Spokane faces up honestly and effectively to the issues like that?
On poverty, I think over the course of the last 15 years, Spokane has become much more attentive to and aware of the poor that live within our midst. If you look at healthcare, Project Access and Christ Clinic work tirelessly to provide healthcare to people who struggle. In the area of employment, Christ Kitchen and Blue Button Apparel hire people who struggle. We have housing consortiums. Habitat for Humanity has been very active here. The Center for Justice has been responsive to the poor who struggle with legal issues. So we've done a number of really good things, but we still have challenges. It is political and controversial to count numbers of the poor in our community, but I think most people would agree that there are at least 20,000 people in our community that are living at or below the poverty level. And on any given day, more than 1,200 people are homeless, and we don't have enough shelters for them. So we have some challenges. And my argument to students is that poverty, the causes of poverty, are so tremendously complex. No one of us can fully understand what causes someone to be poor. You've got physical and mental illness and drug and alcohol abuse and domestic violence and structural or systemic injustices in a community. All of these things contribute. So it's complicated. But at the same time, every single one of us can make a difference. And if every entrepreneur and every janitor and every hairdresser and every student and every person at home with their children and every architect and every lawyer and every business person, if every single person did one thing, we'd make a powerful impact on the lives of those 20,000 people who live among us. You can feed people who live under the bridge. You can adopt a family. You can hire someone who's recently out of prison. And if in addition to that we harness the intellectual ability of the many universities in our midst, there is so much that we could do if we encouraged each other to do one thing, just one thing over the course of a year, and then that will lead to something else.
So we're into round 2 here, and after this round we are going to go to audience questions, so please bring those up. This is for Reverend Mitchell, and it's about race. Spokane's population is about 90% white, yet you've chosen to put your roots down here, and as I've heard a couple times already, you're very happy here. However, is it an act of courage to be a person of color in Spokane?
Well, I think it's an act of courage to do the right thing. You know, of course, I wouldn't be sitting here saying that, you know, race is not here in Spokane, because, you know, it is, and it's all over. And I think that, the courage comes when people start to do things about it. And I, like I said before, you know, in the Spokane area, we have leaders that are rising up and doing those things. I can say that Bethel AME Church is a multicultural congregation, and so you know, it's not you know, people coming there just because, you know, you're black or whatever. You know, they're coming there to hear the gospel. And I believe that for myself, I would put the gospel over race. And in boy, in the Spokane area, you know, it's a hard question. This is a hard question, but I just can't see me having to struggle to be who I am in Spokane, because I believe that the community of Spokane is a community that's striving toward greatness, and some of these things that's going on around the nation. You know, we're here in Spokane, and as leaders, we're dealing with them, and so I would like to say that wow, I would put the gospel over race.
Thank you. This one's for Breean, about the environment. The Spokane River can't talk. It's out there, and it's got stuff in it, and it's got bridges over it, and it's got problems. It's got 2 states. Your efforts with the Center for Justice and just beyond that have helped to give the river a voice. But do you think Spokane is hearing that cry for help?
Well, the Spokane River is, you know, a great example, an illustration of the challenge of the commons, where we all use it basically as a garbage dump with some intermediate treatment, but it's not really good enough treatment for the science. And the science is pretty clear that the river is in a lot of distress. Some of it's 100 years old from mining, some of it's more recent from just population, and some of it's climate change. It's running out of water. And so what's challenging is that we've done things as a government, mostly it has to do with the river, for years the same way. And although there's new technology and there's new ideas, people are afraid to do what it takes to really make sure the river's thriving and healthy for generations. And most of us are just consumers of the utility districts, and we think we can't do that much. But the truth is, just the same tragedy of the commons that can destroy a jewel can also heal it. And we are now starting to see, you know, people literally, you know, reusing water, conserving water, Government and private sector are starting to reuse water. You know, in my opinion, the new county sewage treatment plant with just reuse, watering golf courses with treated water and changing out some plumbing and irrigation, we wouldn't need that plant. But that's risky for some, and we haven't gotten there. So the lawyers, we've basically insisted on the science, which is kind of not very lawyerly. Usually we just want to use words. And we've kind of stopped the way things normally have gone. And there's time for education. Because it's not enough to win a court case and then tell the rest of the aquifer region, oh, you just got to do it differently. You got to change people's hearts and minds. And I think there is space to do that. It is not done yet. But when that space is filled with the right knowledge and the right technology, then the folks that are in charge of our infrastructure along the river, they will have the political cover and the confidence to move ahead so that we really can have a thriving watershed in the next 20, 50, and 100 years.
Chief Kirkpatrick, you're a successful woman in what's typically been a man's job. That, to me, seems like there must be some inner source of personal courage that has allowed you to do that. You can tell me if that I'm way over the gender line here, but it just strikes me that people would like to hear that story.
Well, I don't necessarily have that perspective. I guess the way I look at it is that I became a police officer with the intent of it really only being a couple of year event for me. I thought it would be a good fit. I'm a people person. I just was attracted to it, but I did not grow up wanting to be a police officer, so I kind of fell into police work. So I didn't go in with any agendas associated, like I'm a woman trying to prove myself. I thought it'd be a 3-year event. 28 years later, I'm still here. So I guess the way I always approached it was that I was going to be who I was. I was going to try to use the gifts and the talents that I was aware I had, which are not many, but to sow those seeds. And I think success is just doing the best that you are capable of. And I will say this, I've said this to most, when I'm in the hospitality room at a convention or whatever, you'll never hear Ann Kirkpatrick say, I just want to be one of the boys. I am not a boy. I cross-dress, but I am not a boy. I just want to be Ann Kirkpatrick. And so I don't have an agenda, but I am a woman. And I do not abdicate my womanhood, but I just, I don't have an agenda. And I think because I didn't have an agenda, I just tried to be successful with my gifts.
Thank you. Betsy, generations of your family have stayed here to build your family businesses, you know, oftentimes in the face of public criticism. But I guess I'm just curious if you'd share with the group, obviously at different times people could move away and you know, live in Seattle or someplace fancy like Portland. But here you are, I mean, 4 generations later you mentioned. And I guess, why Spokane? Why do you feel your roots are able to keep growing here?
Well, I was fortunate growing up where, you know, my family camped and we skied and we took advantage of all those great lifestyle things. So whenever I thought of Spokane, all of that would come back because the lifestyle here is really second to none in the country, maybe the world, if we want to think big. And so when it came to thinking about permanent place to live and raise a family, you know, it was sort of something that just kind of was always in the back of my head. But what's kept me here, well, a couple things. I mean, you know, you grow up, my grandfather always said, you know, it's a great place where wherever you live, you've got to make the most out of it. And you have a responsibility to give back in some fashion. So there's sort of this value of making the most out of wherever you are, but also being invested in the community in some fashion. So that was always kind of a deep value in our family. But then, you know, as I look at Spokane now and think of it in the last, since I moved back here in '92, that Spokane has so much potential, and it's been on the world stage in a, you know, the Expo certainly, and other times in a very positive ways. And that this community really can play, you know, global significance is the way I like to think of it, as a place that will do things that are relevant and significant around the world, whether it's research or whether it's product manufacturing, or maybe it's educating the best and the brightest who will go out, you know, from Whitworth and go solve some problem or be the next great leader of whatever it is. So that is just such an energizing thought for me about how this community has potential to be on the global stage in such a positive way. And I think, you know, hearing all of the comments of all of the others on the stage about how each of us, we have our sort of areas of expertise and areas where we have passion about things, but there's a lot of collaboration that goes along with how we're working in our particular sector, and that's also unique, I think, and that Spokane's got that ability to collaborate amongst organizations that might otherwise not think of collaborating, but that we have that kind of culture, which again is sort of a thing that gets me charged up in the morning about that you can live in a place like Spokane. It has that sort of feel to it.
I think it's cooler than Portland and Seattle anyway.
Rain's over there.
There's a little more opportunity here, a little more chances to do things and make your mark than in some of the bigger cities, I think. When we started the Inlander in '93, just a year after you came back, all the other cities in western U.S. had a weekly newspaper, but Spokane didn't. So there was an opportunity in my hometown. So I do think Spokane continues to offer opportunities in the way that a lot of cities don't. So Julia, on education, as a college professor, you look into the faces of our future every day, and that sounds like a really crappy cliche, but it's actually true, because apparently about 40% of Whitworth grads stay in Spokane and make it their home, and that's pretty cool. But what does it take, and this is right up the alley of Whitworth, is what does it take to make not just enlightened citizens, but courageous citizens?
I'm looking at these students right now, students in this room, who inspire me and encourage me every day. And I would say to you, courage for the post-college student is going to be about, you know, who am I and what is my life going to be like and what kinds of choices am I going to make? Am I going to have my life be mostly shaped by the culture, consuming things, buying things, or am I going to point my life in a different direction? Now, research tells us that if you look at people in their 50s, people who have lived a life of integrated commitment, where the commitments of their heart have sustained them over the decades, and they have lived their lives in a way that matches the beliefs that they've had over the course of their lives, those people will normally have a number of things in common over the course of the decades that they've lived, but particularly when they're 18, 20, 22, 24 years old. These are the four things that we see in people when we look at a 50-year-old and say that person's lived a life of commitment. What did they have when they were younger? Okay, first of all, they had a worldview that was sufficient to help them think through what is evil, how will I respond to evil, what is my job in the world, what does it mean to be human? So worldview. Second, they had mentors, people who could inspire them, encourage them, even when it was very difficult and they wanted to give up and quit, thinking about how they were going to live and what was important to them. Third, they had a peer group, they had friends whose commitments matched their own commitments. They were attentive to that kind of issue at peer group. And then fourth, they had the opportunity to practice their commitments all throughout their lives, starting right away when they were young, as early as middle school, certainly in the college years and right after college. They didn't put off making a contribution to the community. They got involved right away. And that's important for those of us who are in higher education, that we are keeping in mind not just the intellect, although the intellect is critically important, but also the shaping of a student's commitment and their heart, because none of us become courageous citizens on our own. To move from being enlightened to being active and courageous, we do that in community with each other. We do that in relationship. You inspire me. I hope I inspire you. I'm inspired every day by people like our panelists. And when you do the kind of work that folks do here, you can get really discouraged and you can want to quit. And that's where your peers and your mentors and your community becomes very important.
Very well done. So I'm going to go into the audience round here, and we can still squeeze your questions in, so bring them up to Greg if you have any. This is going to be a little bit of a speed round. Maybe you can keep your comments fairly brief. Breean, what's your biggest frustration or the thing you'd like to see changed for the community benefit? And I will ask each of you, the 5 of you, to answer that briefly.
So there's 2 bookends right now that I think the community faces. One, we have a horrendous high school dropout rate. It's just horrendous. And I'm amazed that it's not a crisis and we're not all downtown at something like this saying, we've got to figure this out. And there are some people doing it. But that's one end of it. And the second end of it is a criminal justice system where we've got a lot of great people in it working really hard. But between funding and the approach that's been out there, we have a choice coming up of whether to build a $240 million jail, with financing will cost another $160 million over the next 20 years, or to go to a different approach that is more individualized and more rehabilitative. And I think the underlying theme for both is we need to do more individual assessment in education and criminal justice, not one size fits all. And if we have the courage to do that, and it will take money in the short term, we'll get some solutions to that.
Betsy, do you have 1 or 2 frustrations?
Okay, dropout rate is 1, but we've already covered that. The other is parochialism or lack of regionalism in terms of priorities of where the community ought to go. You know, business, nonprofits, people, you don't stop your work when you hit the city line or the county line or the state line. But, you know, within Spokane County or within the metro area, we have all these different cities, and they don't necessarily work together very well. And that's kind of a constant, one of my things is, you know, keeping folks thinking in terms of regional priorities. And yes, you have to answer to those who elect you, but how we can keep the dialogue at a regional level, because, you know, okay, so in transportation like the North-South Freeway, whether I live way south of town and might not ever drive on it, that's a huge benefit to get truck traffic and connections to Canada and, you know, all that brings. So, you know, I should have a vested interest in that. So that regionalism.
Chief?
The print media.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, that is true. You wanted truth. The media is a big frustration. And then secondly, the level of dissension in our discourse internally and sometimes across for the people who really do need to be talking like us. A lot of discourse in the discussion.
Reverend?
The educational system. I believe that it's time for us in Spokane to rally around and try to fix our educational system so that we can tackle the dropout rate, so that we can tackle closing the achievement gap. I think it's time for us to really put a lot of, actually invest in fixing the system so that there can be education for every child.
Julia?
I agree with all of them. My theme in life is basically I agree with Breean. But I would add to that, the thing I fight in myself, the thing I will fight in all of you in the front row is complacency. That we get so busy with my own job and my own garden and my own vacations and my own stuff. Just leave me alone. Just leave me alone. And that is a big battle for me.
This is kind of straight from the headlines, but I think we referred to it a little bit earlier. Apparently there's a church from the south that wants to come to Spokane fairly soon and spread whatever message it is they're trying to spread to get themselves on TV. I would open it up to anyone who has a comment. What's the courageous way to respond? I mean, I think everybody's confused. Should we just ignore? Should we, I don't know if I'm reflecting current developments or if there are any, but Reverend Mitchell, would you like to start?
Well, from the faith community and being a Christian, we always respond in love. And I think that it's important that we represent Christ well. And I don't have any problem with freedom of speech, where people be out there and doing what they do. But I think it's very important in my faith that we represent Christ, and I know that's love.
Does anyone else have any? Yeah. Julia?
It's been interesting to me at Whitworth. We've been talking about this for a week, and President Taylor has directed some of our conversation, and we've come up with some decisions about how we're going to respond, and we talk about it in class also. And the big theme is one that I agree on: lemons into lemonade. This is an opportunity. Okay, it might not be something that we asked for, it might not be something that we're excited about, but we can use it. We can use it as a key to help encourage discussion in the community and courage in the community.
Anyone else? Chief, I don't know if you're going to get called into action that day.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's where, we are, where a lot of times the public doesn't understand the legal parameters and the legal rights that people have, and that our role as police, we deal only with criminal law. We do not deal with any other body of law. As a chief of police, I deal with employment law and labor law. But as a police department in a matter such as this, our only duty and our only ability is to deal with criminal law. So unless a crime occurs, no, there's nothing we can do.
This is apropos of our times where you turn on the TV and there's a Dino Rossi's terrible, Patty Murray's terrible, Dino Rossi's terrible, back to the news. Is the ugliness of the current political campaigns helping our communities maintain common courtesies and positive attitudes toward each other and our leaders? I think we all know the short answer on that, but does anybody want to elaborate on? Breean, want to take a whack at that?
It's horrible, anyone that watches it or listens to it, and then you hear from the political strategist, oh, but it works. And I'm still not a believer of that. And I think what it will take is people courageously running for office or supporting people and speaking who don't do that, and speaking up against people who do that. But much like the dissents at these funerals that we just can't even understand why anyone would do what they're doing, we don't always have that answer. And so I really agree with Reverend Mitchell that we have to respond in truth and in love and keep speaking it. We still live in the world that we live in, and so we have to operate in it, but it's not an excuse to give up and tune out, I guess.
Anybody else have any feelings about politics?
I might add, part of it is expectation, in that we should expect those who represent us to behave in a civil manner. Now, that doesn't mean you can't disagree, but I think they pander to fears and extremes because we let them. And Chris Marr and Baumgartner had a debate at Downtown Rotary last week or the week before, and it was very spirited, but there was real content in there. And yeah, they've thrown a little mud back and forth against each other, but they've debated enough that they're now into content. So it was a useful debate.
They were both in the room together too, so I think that decorum took over a little bit, which was nice.
Yeah, and so I think it's, we have to, as citizens, expect more from our electeds and expect them to be civil and have that dialogue. And I don't think we're expecting that of them now. And it's a national problem, I think.
Reverend Mitchell?
It's almost time for our elected officials, those who are running for office, really need to take a look at what's going on in the country. right now we're so polarized that I don't believe anything going to get done in Washington. I think it's time for people to really say, you know, let's do something that's going to really fix the situation in our country. And it's unfortunate that people are really, you know, trying to get a job, where there's a lot of people who are unemployed. So I think it's time for people to just calm down and say, let's do something for the country.
I think it also calls on people to use their own brains and use their own backgrounds to filter. It's gotten a lot more complicated to figure out where the truth falls in all this. So it does make it a little bit tougher to be a citizen these days, but that's why we live in America, I guess. We have a final question that I'm going to give everybody a shot at here, and it's what would your advice be to young people toward the end of their college careers about what true happiness is? And, you know, it's tough coming out of college, especially now. I mean, I think the stats on how many unemployed recent college grads is kind of sad. I'm not looking forward to my boys living in my basement after college, so I'm hoping the economy turns around. But you know, these are some people with some great backgrounds and a lot of thoughtfulness, and I'd love to hear, some of the people in the audience would love to hear, what is happiness? Is it a job? Is it a family? Is it more education? Let's start down there with you, Julia.
Happiness. Well, I don't think we get to be happy. I don't think anybody promised us that. And again, as a person of the Christian faith, I don't think that's the goal. I would say to students, think through what the commitments of your heart would be. For some of you, it's faith. For you, it isn't. Then take one step, and then the next step, and then the next step. You've got 55, 60 years to do a wide variety of things in your life. And the first step after college isn't going to be everything for you. But you take one step, and you do as good a job as you can, and then the next door will open. And I think perspective helps. And if I could just go back to the last question, again, I agree with everyone on the panel, but with the perspective of a political scientist, the advertisements will be over in a month. They don't have that much to do with actual governance. And in the history of this country, things have been so much worse than they are right now. You look back in the 1930s, in the 1890s, when we were debating whether we were going to be on the gold standard, politics has been much worse than it is now. So develop some perspective, take one step, have some confidence, hang on to your mentors and your peers.
All right, it's an easy question, Reverend. Just what's the secret to happiness?
Boy, if I really knew that. You know, but I do go back to what you were saying in terms of happiness is not the goal. I think that the most important thing that that you need to look at is being who you are, really embracing what you have learned, and taking that and being who you are. What you want to pursue is joy. You want to have joy in your life, because happiness is only temporary. And so it's important that you pursue joy, and that be who you are. Just be who you are.
Well, likewise, happiness is an emotion that comes and goes. So I think the secret is being assured of yourself. And so if I may, I will share a real quick little kind of a macabre story, but I was a brand new police officer, and unlike so many people, I was kind of in search of truth. What is truth? And I was sitting at this funeral looking at the flag-draped coffin of a police officer, thinking to myself, well, that could have been me on that call, and it just wasn't my call that I went to. And what happened was, while I was sitting in the funeral, I made a very cognitive decision about what I believed about death. And once I made that decision, it was a very clear decision What do I believe about death? From that point on, I knew fully what I understood about where I wanted to go in life. So it gave me a true north, and belief is a decision. And that day I made a decision about life. So when you settle that question, you can handle the storms of disappointment, grief, and great happiness, and you'll stay steady. And that's the secret for me, staying steady. How do you follow that?
I am not a very religious person, so faith is still sort of one of those, don't have the answer to that. But a couple of maybe little tricks, because I believe in the philosophy, or not tricks, but little things that I've learned over time. My father dropped dead of a heart attack at 60, very unexpected, and it was a very difficult time in our family and for me. So every day I found something good or beautiful to recognize and to think about, and consciously, whether it was a raindrop, silly sort of thing, or somebody smiled at me, or I made someone laugh, or whatever it was. Just, it could be teeny. And I still do that today, so that there's something wonderful in my life every day. The other, and definitely it's your personal, you're doing the right thing for the right reasons, how you feel in your heart about what your passion is, and how grounded you are in yourself. That the others have addressed. I was going to address this to the women in the room, but this holds true for the men as well. I am absolutely a believer you can have it all. And being all is, a career, a family if you choose, a great life partner, and all of those things that you imagine. It takes courage and hard work, but don't think you ever have to compromise.
If I was talking to my 1985 graduate of a liberal arts college with a liberal arts degree and no real skills self, I would say, one, there's a great ride out there. Two, your life and your career, it's a whole arc, especially for the liberal arts person. It's not your first job. It's not your first car. It is a whole life. And I think too often we get done with college and we've got to make it and be successful. And I think it's exactly the opposite. It's really about finding out what was placed inside us that's unique, what our passions are, what do we love, and then searching that for every day. And you have time to get the expertise and the recognition and the skills, and you'll be amazing in your life. But you will never have the time when you're young and expected to make mistakes, and maybe not as many personal commitments that you can really explore and find out. And so I think the time to be gentle with yourself and to take risks and be adventurous is now. And the second piece is to realize that it is the journey and not the destination. And I've have a course for lawyers that I've done over the years called How to Be a Happier Lawyer, starting today. And if you're not familiar with the literature and the science, 70% of lawyers are really unhappy. And that's because they're not really following what they like to do. And the key to it, though, like many 12-step programs, is pick one thing that you like to do in the law and do it. And if it means you have to volunteer and do it on Saturday or in the evenings, then do that. And then next week, pick something else and slowly expand. And when you have 2 job choices, take the one that's more you, not the one that's more money, the more you. And as if you follow that every day and every week and every month, over a lifetime, you will be doing more and more of what lights your passion. And when your passion is lit, you will have lots of people around you and be very giving, and you will be fulfilling the purpose for which you're here.
Well, I don't know if any of that made any sense to the students, but I'm inspired. That was great. I think it's always useful and exciting and fun to sit around and talk about stuff. And what a great panel, everybody. Thanks to the panel.